CJ, so how did you become a coach, and specifically a coach for social entrepreneurs?
Well, I come from a background that I think nobody would expect would really lead to success. I dropped out of high school and I ran away from home when I was 15. And I lived on the street for a couple of years before I managed to get my first minimum wage job. And, for many years I was really hesitant to share this with people. I didn't want people in my professional world to know that I started out as a homeless dropout, or that I had so much struggle in my early life. But finally I realized that it actually helped other people to figure out, to hear about how I overcame my obstacles. If I could start out with no education and earn a college degree and then eventually teach classes at universities, so could they. If I could go from not having enough money to rent a room to owning a home, so could they. So now I make it a practice to tell people about where I came from when they ask about me. In my mid-30s, I was working as a productivity consultant, and I was helping mid-sized companies figure out how to get things done. And I was networking with my peers, with other consultants, other entrepreneurs, to develop more business. And I found myself in a leadership role in one of my networking groups, and people were always asking me to help them with their business issues. So I discovered that I actually enjoyed much more the conversations I was having with my peers than I did with the corporate clients I was working with. So I decided to start helping very small companies and the people who ran them get things done, and instead of the corporate clients I'd been consulting for. And I've found that work so rewarding. I've been doing it for 20 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yes, it is.
And so what are the specifics of coaching social entrepreneurs?
Well, I decided to coach social entrepreneurs. It's always been important to me to make a difference in the world and to be socially conscious and socially responsible. And over the time I've been a coach, I found that I tended to attract people as clients who were like myself. So the people who I found myself working with, they were people who themselves, they were wanting to make a difference. They were socially conscious. They were socially responsible. So this was a specialty that really evolved. I still do coach all sorts of entrepreneurs, but the type of clients I particularly enjoy are those social entrepreneurs and activists who are launching and developing enterprises that fulfill their own life purpose by making a positive difference in the world. So I work with people who are at all stages of entrepreneurship. Maybe they're just exploring an idea for an enterprise, to getting started with a brand new venture, to becoming more strategic about an organization that's already up and running. And I help them with creating a clear vision for what it is they're trying to do, developing their own potential as a leader and as an entrepreneur, and with marketing, because that's one of the things that I'm known for. So I help them with marketing tactics and tools and skills, but very importantly with things like business models and funding mechanisms. How do you make this thing go? That's probably one of the biggest questions I help my clients answer, as we look at what sort of structure is going to help them achieve their goals. Do they need to be running something that looks like a business? Does it need to be look like a charity? Is it maybe a cross between those two things? Or maybe they're simply going to work independently as a professional activist without having an enterprise at all. So I help them sort through those decisions, and on an ongoing basis, hold on to the attitudes and the habits that lead to success. It's really a tricky business. You have to find the balance between achieving a higher purpose in the world and fulfilling your own life purpose, and simultaneously generating enough revenue for your enterprise to be sustainable. So I serve as a thinking partner for people who need to maintain that very difficult balance.
Yeah, sounds great. And so what kind of services and products do social entrepreneurs have? Do they offer? Do your clients offer?
Um, I tend to work more with people who are offering services than people who are having a product-based business, although certainly I've worked with all kinds. So it's a pretty wide variety of people. I'll just give you some examples. Um, I have had a client who offered sexual harassment training in public schools. I have had a client who was a sustainability consultant, a client who was running an international nonprofit to put in place entrepreneurship programs in the developing world, a client whose enterprise was providing microloans for people in developing world villages to install solar power. A client who was had a learning center where she helped at-risk kids be more successful in schools. Another client who wrote a book helping women who were living with life-threatening diseases to have their careers and businesses be successful despite the fact that they were struggling with those issues. A client who had a research facility who was coming up with new treatments for HIV/AIDS. So as you can see, a pretty wide range of possibilities. Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years, and so lots and lots of examples of the different sorts of things that people can do. Some of them look like businesses, some of them look like charities, and some of them look like self-employment. You know, I've had a number of clients who would classify themselves as being activists. They make their money by writing and speaking and teaching about issues that are important to them and issues that achieve a higher purpose in their communities or in the world.
And CJ, and do you think there is a pattern, of challenges that these people face usually?
Yeah, I think there are. I think that one of the primary challenges is the one I mentioned, that you've got to come up with that balance somehow, right? Between how do I make this thing economically sustainable? How do I make it achieve its making a difference purpose out there in the world? And then how do I simultaneously achieve my own life purpose and stay true to that? So in order to keep that balance, you have to really work on all aspects of the enterprise. You know, if you were thinking of yourself as being the CEO and you've got all of these different departments in your organization, you know, even if you're just one person, you still have to deal with finance. You still have to deal with strategic direction. You still have to deal with marketing. Marketing in and of itself is a pretty difficult thing because you have to determine how to market yourself ethically and authentically, be successful, get your message out there, but still staying true to your own values and ideals.
Mm-hmm.
So that staying true piece is something we come back to over and over again. Every one of my clients has exactly the same set of issues that any business or any self-employment model might have, but then they've got added on top of this layer of making sure that their business is, in most cases, not just socially responsible, but an active contributor to a positive society. That creates a layer of complexity that it can be challenging to stay on top of.
Yeah. And what advice could you give to a coach or a social entrepreneur who wants to serve people that cannot afford his services?
Let's say, for example, that you are a service provider of some kind. Maybe you're a coach, a consultant, a trainer, a teacher. You have to do one of three things. You've either got to make a percentage of what you do pro bono work. So it's not 100%. You don't have every piece of work that you do dedicated to a social purpose. You carve out a piece of it and you say, this is my pro bono work. I spend a significant percentage of my effort on doing this work, but it's not everything that I do. The other work that I do, that's offered to the general public, to corporations to whoever my target market is at a market rate. And so therefore that work sustains the pro bono work or the reduced rate work that I do. So that's one thing. That's one approach that you can take.
Mm-hmm.
Another approach you can take is you can find a market who themselves can afford to pay you. So that, for example, is the approach that most of the time I take. Now, I do pro bono work too, but I have identified a market who themselves can afford to pay me, which is this market of entrepreneurs. So the people who become social entrepreneurs very often come from a background where maybe they've owned a company before, maybe they still own a company, or maybe they have been very successful in a particular career field. Maybe they're still in that field. So they have some financial resources. They're not starting from scratch. And they recognize the importance of having a companion, a partner along this path. And so they carve out those funds to be able to afford to pay me. So this intersection between social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs and professionals, this is a market who themselves can afford to pay me for what I do. So that's an example of that second approach. The third approach is you need to find a third-party funder. So let's say, for example, you want to coach at-risk youth to stay in school. So that's an area where coaching has been proven to have a significant impact. But of course, the young people themselves, they can't afford to pay you. Their parents probably can't afford to pay you. We all know how strapped for cash public school districts are. Who's going to pay? Well, let's say it is a local economic development project whose part of their charter is to increase school participation and retention because they know that's how they're going to develop a local educated workforce. They could provide funding to coaching to keep youth stay in school. So that's an example of third-party funding. Sometimes it's a combination of all three of those: the percentage of pro bono work, the market who themselves can afford to pay, and then that third-party funder. You've got to look for a funding mechanism. I think the mistake that some people make is they want to just go out there and start doing the work without looking for who's going to pay for it, how's it going to get paid for. That's great. They're very well intentioned, but they burn out because somehow they have to be making a living. Somehow the enterprise has to become sustainable. It's much better to look at those questions up front and to figure that out.
Yeah, so do you think that social entrepreneurs mostly come from business backgrounds?
I think a lot of them come from business backgrounds. Not necessarily. Some of them come from nonprofit or social welfare backgrounds, and they're willing to learn the business skills that they need to start applying business models to those goals. But a pretty good percentage of them come from a business background. You know, we are seeing a huge growth of social entrepreneurship out of the traditional business schools right now. People who are in MBA programs, and there are even MBA programs now specifically dedicated to social entrepreneurship. So those are the people who are coming from a business background in terms of that's their learning, that's their education. But also a big chunk of the social entrepreneurs are people who've already been successful in business, and now they want to turn their efforts and their energy to having a business enterprise that also is going to make the world a better place.
Yeah. And so do you think there are more social entrepreneurs in the US, in the UK, and not really in less developed countries?
I think there probably are more social entrepreneurs in the developed countries, simply because that's where people have the resources. You know, in a lot of the developing world, people are just trying to survive. They're trying to get the basic stuff done that's supporting their family, their village, their city. And they don't have the energy, they don't have the extra resources to devote to enterprises that are going to perhaps take things to another level. And I think that that's one of the things that the developed world can contribute to the developing world, is that we do have people with more resources. We do have people with maybe a little bit extra to give. And so they have the mental and emotional energy to devote to how else could this be done? What's a bigger, better way this could be accomplished? And so these kinds of projects that they come up with, you know, not every social entrepreneurship project is focused on the developing world, but the ones that are, I think it's a huge contribution that we in the developed world can make.
I have read that you were part of so many associations and organizations like Send Girls to School Project, A Good Deed Tea, San Francisco Social Enterprise Alliance, and Ashoka. So could you please, yeah, you're so happy about that. And
Well, I am. I am. Separate from my coaching work, yes, I'm always involved with a number of nonprofits and charities, both locally and globally. Um, my primary focus right now is on a good deed tea. So what a good deed tea does is we organize giving circles. We gather together women to support better lives for women and girls around the world. So we organize groups of women who join together to support the cause of their choice, and then each circle donates money to a pooled fund, and we host gatherings, which are usually teas, to increase our awareness about the causes that we're supporting and decide where our funds should go. So, a Good Deed Tea in San Francisco, our Giving Circle, we currently support 3 projects. We support CamFed, which trains young women entrepreneurs in Africa and provides them with startup funding. We support the Rose Foundation's Deaf Women's Empowerment Group in Nepal, and that group helps deaf women entrepreneurs to support themselves. They are making hand-stitched greeting cards, and they are also learning how to become tailors. And that project I find particularly exciting because it's gathering these deaf women together who in some cases have never really been able to communicate before. They may have never met another deaf person. They've never known anybody who knew sign language. So they've really been unable to communicate until now they're gathering together. And the third project we support is Saki for Girls Education in India. And Saki helps girls in the slums of Mumbai achieve a basic education. And Good Deed Tea funds their girls' book bank, which helps these Indian girls learn to read and enjoy reading so that they are more interested in furthering their education. So I've also, in recent years, I've served as an advisor to Ashoka Youth Venture, where I was helping them to develop young people in launching their own social ventures. That's what Ashoka Youth Venture does. And also on the board of the San Francisco Social Enterprise Alliance.
and what is the San Francisco Social Enterprise Alliance for?
The Social Enterprise Alliance provides education and advocacy and peer support to people who are operating social enterprises around the U.S. So with local chapters like the one that I helped to found in San Francisco, we bring social enterprise practitioners together to network and to learn and to support each other. So, for example, one of the things the chapter does is pitch nights. We organize a night where people can come and pitch their social enterprise idea and get feedback and input about their idea, get their idea critiqued, and also get the word out there about what their own social venture idea is to a group of people who are the very folks who need to know more about what they're doing and can provide them with ideas and resources to take it bigger.
Okay, so CJ, I've noticed that there are groups for U.S. entrepreneurs, right? Groups that support social entrepreneurs in the U.S. and in the U.K. But for somebody who is not from there, like for example, I'm Russian, so I've been trying to find some alliances or grants that could help people like me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could not find anything really.
Yeah.
So do you think there is something like that for people who are not from the US or the UK?
Mm-hmm. In some countries, it does exist. Sometimes it is an outgrowth of a US or UK based organization. Sometimes it's begun organically in the local country with sometimes economic development funding. For example, I know that there's a number of programs in local communities in Africa that have come out of funding from the World Bank. So I know that they do exist, but they definitely do not exist everywhere. I was just in Russia myself for
Yes,
two
tell me
weeks,
about this, please.
and I was there my for travel, not as a tourist, not in any kind of role to do with helping social entrepreneurs. But Russia is a good example of a country that has huge economic development challenges, and
Yeah.
also a country that, even though they have a long history of under the table entrepreneurship, the above the table entrepreneurship is actually fairly new in the country, right? So there isn't that groundedness in entrepreneurship as an avenue that exists in some other countries, like in the US, where we have a very long tradition of individual entrepreneurship. And certainly, entrepreneurship programs in Russia could really benefit a lot of the challenges that the Russian people are currently having with the economic issues that they face. I know that one of the things that we've seen in Africa, because that is a place where a certain amount of effort has been put in, goodness knows not enough, because Africa has multiple challenges and needs a lot of assistance, is that when you get together a group of people and you have them support each other as peers, magic starts to happen. So, in all of these programs where they have gathered people together to learn entrepreneurship skills and then given them startup funding in order to begin an entrepreneurial venture, what they've found is that part of what makes the whole thing work is simply the process of getting the entrepreneurs together. Yes. And I certainly found that here in the US. When I was a startup entrepreneur myself, just getting together with other entrepreneurs and realize, oh, I'm not the only one who's struggling with this. Other people have these same challenges and issues. How did you solve that? Had you learned anything that can help me? And those informal conversations are every bit as valuable as the classroom or the organized learning. So, I would definitely encourage anybody who finds themselves in a place without an entrepreneurship program to try and get one going, to get together with entrepreneurs and look and see. There are curricula, there are sets of curriculum available for free for entrepreneurship programs that can be adopted. There's one I'm thinking of called the Barefoot MBA, I believe is the name of it. And that's an example of one that's been created that's available at no charge that anybody can go and get. There are others that exist. And bringing a curriculum like that together with a group of people, even if there's no teacher, right, is extremely valuable because of the peer support and learning that entrepreneurs provide to each other. And once you have an organized group, it's much, much easier to get funding. One person has a real challenge getting funding, but a group of people, a team working together, that's who funders want to give money to, is organized groups. They don't want to give money to just one person. So once you have that group together, you've got a better chance of finding somebody who's willing to provide you with funds.
Exactly. I actually found something like that, funds for entrepreneurs based abroad at Women's Empowerment Network or something similar.
Yes.
But it had to be a group. And I myself live in China now, so I cannot really do that. And I just prefer working by myself because it's just a lot more convenient and I have more freedom.
Yes.
So that was a huge barrier. So I have to fund everything myself for now, which I'm happy with.
Well, keep in mind, and I would suggest this to you or to anybody, that in the year 2013, groups no longer need to be people who are physically together in one room. That groups can exist that actually never meet each other in person. Virtual communities are really a viable possibility for any kind of group endeavor. So, the group that I'm part of right now, A Good Deed Tea, yes, we do get together live in person once per quarter, But the rest of the time, we do everything that we do online, on the phone. So there's really a lot that's possible, even if you're all by yourself and there's nobody else around you.